process that will be proceeded with additional discussion, particularly related to salaries, wages, and benefits. As far as an update on where we stand, it's pretty static. The numbers that we received last month, with the exception of the duplication of MVH being removed. Susan, any further comment there?
No, that's the only thing that's changed since we saw last time. We took the duplicated expenses from general and motor vehicle highway, just left the truck driver salaries and capital engineer salary.
Yes.
Motor vehicle, the remainder of highway personnel stayed in the general fund. That was the only changes that have been made.
Thank you very much. First item of business is to approve the budget ordinance for solid waste management district. So, are there any further questions? We can have Director Jennifer Lawrence up if we need that. If not, do we have a motion to approve?
Are we actually approving or just ratifying? Do we actually approve
You
it?
have to,
I mean,
yes,
it's
you
kind of
have to
funny because
actually approve the ordinance and then we all have to sign it, even though there isn't,
even though we really have no say, but.
just a technicality.
Make a motion to approve the solid waste budget.
Thank you, and a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. And Councilwoman Jennifer Hussetter and Councilwoman Sherry Ritchie, thank you for the work that you've done, the deep dive on salaries, wages, and benefits. And would like to hear the summation of your work to further inform us as we move forward with making decisions, starting with EMA and Deputy Coroner.
Excuse me. No, I'll jump down. If I might, Madam President, Julie Taft, Law. I've been working with Councilman Hofstadter over the past couple of days to try and figure out a few things. These two departments have an interesting history that I'm still trying to get my head around. And, you know, I know that you're moving forward with your budget today. Your salary ordinance does not need to be passed until later this year. If I can make a recommendation, that we kind of pause that consideration so that I can meet with Councilman Hofstadter and Councilman Ritchie, go into a deeper dive on this. So I'm not providing inadequate advice on how to proceed on this. I think that would be the best way to move forward. If that's okay with the council.
Thank you.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Super, appreciate it.
I also think too, just my point of view, I think Justin needs to be part of that discussion as well, and also EMA and possibly a commissioner since they fall under.
Absolutely. So long as we don't have a
Yeah.
majority of equal
Yes,
dividends.
absolutely. Yeah, but I think the department heads need to be involved as well.
So we have to talk.
Okay, and with that,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. I'm going to start at the executive summary level, but I first want to just say thank you to my colleague Jennifer, and then everyone else that's in this room or outside this room that met with us or had input, because there was a lot of time and a lot of effort put into each of the meetings and discussions that we had and the questions that we had. So I want to thank everybody on that. And then I think what I'm going to do is just, I sent a memo to each of the counselors, and I'm going to read a little bit of that in terms of the executive summary. And then I think what would be best is if we go into a discussion of who has questions from the review that you've done over the weekend. And then, you know, we have some specific answers, and certainly between Jennifer and I, we'll do our best to answer those. So let me start with the memo. As part of the 2024 budgeting process, the council discussed the need for a deep dive into the compensation for the county. With the first person salary study done in 22, the council's goals are to establish and maintain competitive rates of pay for employees that are fully functional and that have requisite skills and experience to be successful. The council's short-term and long-term objectives are to follow, as practically as possible, the salary study year to year with input from first person for aging the study on an annual basis. And again, I think part of the reason I'm stating that is because I think this is our first serious formal effort to do so, and the objective would be to have this engagement every year. I'm not sure we're gonna need to do it to the extent that we did this year. It'll be more of an updating effort. Jennifer and I have spearheaded this effort and have worked alongside Debbie Crum, auditor, and Megan Smith, HR director, along with each department head and/or elected official. In these discussions, we inquired specifically about each position and the goals for compensation therein. At the same time, discussions were held surrounding specific circumstances, including hiring challenges, including but not limited to labor shortages and starting salary shortfalls due to extreme inflationary pressures not seen in the past 3+ decades, etc. We also took into consideration the 2023 38th Annual County Fact Book published by the Association of Indiana Counties. Lastly, in each meeting, we discussed performance reviews and the frequency with which these performance reviews and discussions were occurring. And to no surprise, we learned that some departments are providing annual reviews and some are not. We informed each department that we will be providing further guidance in concert with HR in the coming months of the importance of a disciplined and thoughtful performance management process, which includes annual reviews, including performance improvement plans where necessary, as a means for requesting compensation increases. And I guess just a little sidebar here, I think everyone that we spoke with understood that. I think there's one exception. The sheriffs have their own performance review compensation process, so I'm saying this in a broad brush, knowing that there are some exceptions. And I would also just say that in my prior life as a partner at Ernst & Young, this wasn't new to me because I had I managed and led teams over those years, so I had to do performance reviews. I had to determine salary. So I'm just saying that for public record so that you don't think the new novice person has never touched any kind of compensation discussion or performance review. So just to throw that out. And of course, Jennifer, in her role, this was not a foreign concept as well, given what you do for a living. After our meetings and analysis, it's clear that each department has varying needs. Our goal was to calculate the amounts to get every employee to the midpoint on the first person salary study for the council's review. And I think it's important that I state a few of our assumptions so that we just have that on record. And again, then we're going to have a discussion, I hope, in a broad discussion about what your questions and comments are. Before we address merit increases, we aged the first person study, which means we looked at the minimums, midpoints, and maximums, and we aged that by 2%. First person actually recommended a range of 2.6 to 3.8. We felt the 2% was reasonable in light of our overall methodology, which included for purposes of the council's review, a 3% increase for merit. And just to note, for those employees above the minimum but below the midpoint and who had an overall raise, that is age plus merit, of 10% or more, we computed a 3-year spread. For those employees below the minimum, we calculated a 1/3 increase to get to the age minimum. That is the second, third, 1/3 from last year. The exception to this was for the surveyor, as this position did not receive a 1/3 increase last year. Let's see, try to think. Based on the work to date, the total increase in salaries would be $598,000 based on this model. And then we went ahead and looked at 2025 and 2026 to see what these amounts would look like for reasonableness and sustainability. And we did that applying a 3% increase, again, for sample purposes only. And we also included the additional 1/3 amounts. That's assuming we pay the increases over a multi-year period versus all in 1 year. Those totals were $712,000 and $733,000 for 25 and 26 respectively. I'm gonna stop there, and then we have a discussion on each department that we can delve into, but since each of the council members has received that work, I wanna stop there. And Jennifer, was there anything else, like from a 30,000-foot perspective, that you wanna make sure we get out there?
No, not, I mean, maybe when we get to individual departments, but not right now.
And I think in terms of time and, is Jewel still here? Okay. Jewel mentioned the EMA and coroner pieces that we will defer our discussion on. But with that said, I know that I sent this out to everybody a few days ago, and we can literally go down each departmental discussion, or we can field questions, or both. What would you prefer?
Why don't we just go through?
Okay. Do you want to do this, or do you want me to? Okay. So from the prosecutor's office, we noted that the office experienced a mid-year budget increase in '23 due to the IPAC, or Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council, increasing the prosecutor's base pay. The salary study was completed prior to those increased rates, so we just note that. We heard from Kent Eastwood, and he requested a 5% raise for his staff, and that's a 5% raise on top of 2023 amounts, and that's slightly different than what I described as our assumptions for most of the departments, which was age at 2%, and then add a 3% merit increase on top of that. Technically, if you do that math, our method that we used for a lot of departments would result in a slightly more, like 0.006. I know, I'm just saying. So it's close. It's not exact. Did anybody have any questions on that, or do you want me to just keep going?
From the prosecutor's office, prosecutors specifically said that his staff is well paid. It's not a concern, not an issue for him. I know that offices as well had staff increases. They've had the most requests, when I look back at it, over the last 3 years of requesting 3 to 5 plus individuals every year. So when you look at it, they had the highest growth in the county, continue to go at that rate. So as you look at your numbers that you just shared, excuse me, prior to this,
Yes.
your numbers are actually going to be higher at the projected rate.
You mean assuming that he asked to
Looking
hire
at-
more people in the
Looking
future?
at the past historical growth of the county, your numbers are going to be higher than the 712 projected.
Okay. Well, what we haven't done, Aaron, is project what the headcount increases are. And I think that is a drill that we're gonna have to do on a year-to-year basis unless somebody knows something about those assumptions that we can bake in now. We just heard from Judge Shine, and, her discussion of how things have changed with the courts. I mean, it's hard to, I'm not sure if Kent has specifics about what that head count would be, but we're certain.
I do. I mean,
You do? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point.
I'm not really gonna go into the specifics. I know, yes, quite a few headcount increases, but I would say for every department, I think these numbers are gonna be,
Yeah,
he probably will know more, are gonna be significantly lost, if I'm not mistaken, grant dollars
Yeah.
that he's gonna be coming back to us,
Sure.
where we're gonna have to pick up the slack. So that's gonna be another
I appreciate
portion
that.
that we're gonna have to pick up.
Okay. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we can plan for the headcount, in doing that. Just to speak to some points, we are playing catch-up from what happened in 2016 and 2017 as it relates to local law enforcement, as they substantially increased the number of officers in the county, and our cases went up. Our numbers about our staffing levels are all based upon Department of Justice and IPAC recommended staffing levels.
Yeah.
So right now, assuming you guys passed what you said you would last month, our staffing levels will be at 85% of recommended levels.
Okay.
That's a good number. That's a good way to be, but
Yeah.
if we project out to a population of, say, in 20 years, about an annual increase of like I think it's 3%, 3%. That puts our population around 140,000. If we want to get to 100% staffing levels, that would, assuming today's crime rate, 2022's crime rate, we would need 63 employees. We currently have 33 or 35, I can't remember which one of the two. So, now, what's 85% of 60? So that's what we,
Got it.
that's kind of the methodology that we're working on, but we're gonna let the numbers tell us, okay, in 2023, this is how many you should have, see what it's like, kind of go from there, but
Okay.
we do have a methodology to follow and numbers to dictate where we should go. We can generally plan to say, okay, we're gonna need at least 85% of 65 people,
Okay.
and we can just kind of say, okay, divide that by 20, this is how much we should average a year.
Right.
And some years we won't, some years we will, and it just kind of depends.
Okay.
But that's kind of methodology that I've kind of undertaken and
Okay.
want to follow. And we can kind of have what an end game would be, assuming crime rate stays the same, doesn't
Right.
go up, doesn't go down,
Right. Okay.
so.
Thank you. And I think to your point, Aaron, it's just that we note it, and I don't know what else to, not sure what else to do in terms of the projections at this point, but I think your points are well taken. Any other thoughts from you? Let's move to the highway department. And you might remember, if you read the memo for today, that I spent a little bit more time on this one because we spent a little more time with Nick. We noted a significant compensation variance between county pay versus current market, a national shortage of truck drivers. Additional stressors include federal paperwork filing mandates for each federal grant received. Thank you, federal government, that's just my 2 cents. Loss of staffing due to FMLA and military leave, and competitive compensation outside the county. Certainly LEAP is causing additional demands on top of the ones already. And as it relates to the truck driver shortage, I think the American Journal of Transportation recently said, there's a national shortage due to high demand for truck drivers in the U.S., a retiring workforce, a lack of new drivers coming into the industry, and drivers leaving the industry. Nick basically is asking that we get the highway employees to aged midpoint and get an increase on top of that. I guess the couple other things that I should have mentioned earlier. We talked about, the decreasing revenues that are coming in annually because of higher use of electric vehicles. The 50/50 MVH rules are painful. So we're just acknowledging in this memo that we need to have some legislative intervention in our short-term and long-term plans as a means to increase funding. And that can take many forms. And I think there was a presentation at the latest conference, or actually a couple of presentations. So certainly want to hone in on what the AIC had to say about that. But with that, I just leave it up to the rest of the council. Any questions on the highway department? Because I think it was the one that probably had the biggest hill to get up to get to the midpoint. Any other thoughts?
So you said, you talked about decreasing revenues because of electric vehicles. Is there a association tied to that specifically, an amount that we're seeing directly?
I don't have it, Nick may have it. And I'm not sure I asked you for that, so you may not have it on you.
Yeah, so what she referenced at the AIC presentation, it was covered, LTAP put a presentation together of the gallons of gas that's been purchased in Indiana, which is where the tax dollars comes from. Hasn't seen a huge decrease at this point, but hasn't seen an increase. But the
Okay.
federal mandate on the electric vehicle usage and creation will see it. So that's we haven't seen the steep downturn yet.
Okay.
Okay.
That's basically the gist of
Thank
the
you.
presentation that they gave at
All right.
AIC.
Okay,
Because I looked it up, it's a 0.7, it's not even a 1% change yet in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, it's just been the cost of everything has gone up substantially, and the costs have not
Okay.
increased with the MPH revenues, so it's been pretty consistent, even though the tax increase at the state level has creeped up the dollar, or the penny a gallon,
yeah,
it hasn't shown a major increase to the MPH.
yeah, that's my fault, because I didn't put it in there and I didn't track it down, so I was doing my discussion, so thank you, Aaron. Other thoughts on that?
You talked about the labor shortage. I responded to an email that is going to be a problem. I think that goes well into, I think, 2038 is what the McKinsey survey said. So
Yeah.
that's not going away.
Yep,
The competitive
Can you
salaries.
speak louder, please?
The competitive salaries, that's going to be a persistent problem as well, I think, with Lee and the companies that are doing work there. It's a natural, Nick, you can probably speak to this, your drivers are probably getting lured by companies because they see, hey, you're working for the highway department, come and drive our dump trucks and work for Lee. It's an ongoing problem that it's not, they come here, they work, they see someone else, they're gonna go away. It's not gonna just change overnight.
No, that's one thing I know we've worked on substantially with the wage study was the full compensation package. And that is something we talk about regularly at the highway department, even during the hiring process. The hours that we can offer, the PTO, the benefits that you don't probably see in that private sector job, the consistency. And we've been very successful at bringing in employees and retaining employees that see that value. But as that number has now gone to not just a few dollars an hour difference, but 20, 30% difference in dollars with young folks coming in, starting a family, those things are very much enticing to draw them away. And this wage study, like I mentioned in our conversations, doesn't even come close to that hourly rate, doesn't even get in the ballpark. And going to the midpoint doesn't get us in the ballpark of what they're offering for a private trucking company. And in reality, we should be asking for a lot more to try to compete. We're not even trying to do that. We tried to bring a solution that was a palatable solution, that's something the wage study had put together from last year. So that was the gist of what we're trying to bring. You referenced the email. There's not much we can do with FMLA and military leave. That's federally protected, jobs. And some of the openings that we have are people that have retired that have been there 25, 30 years. So those things have been, to backfill those positions, we have to make some concessions on what it is we're looking for, bringing them in and trying to train them. But once they get that driver's license, the commercial driver's license, it does create their value to be much higher. And in the effort of bringing those on and giving that training is trying to give them the idea of why there's a benefit to work at the county highway department instead of going to those trucking companies. But when that percentage continues to grow, it can be too much to overcome in some cases.
The other thing I'd like to mention is Nick is one of the one of the departments that's actually executing performance reviews on a regular basis. So I mean, it was good to hear, because especially the challenges that you're fighting, to know that those employees are getting feedback. I don't know, we don't have an ability to determine what morale is in every department, but that's nothing but a positive from where I sit in terms of the challenges that you're facing. I think it's great that they know where they stand, if they need to make improvements, so.
Well, the best part about that is we get their feedback too.
Yeah.
So we actually ask for their feedback. They get to tell us what they see. We're trying to create that,
Yeah.
that feeling of we understand what they're going through and try to meet those needs. And the one thing that comes up regularly is compensation, as far as dollars are concerned.
Right.
So we wouldn't be doing our part if we weren't coming to you asking for it. We can't ask for additionals. We can't do this in the middle of the year. We can't amend salary ordinances. We're one time a year to ask for it. We just have to talk about it for a series of 6 months and hope to get that approval.
Right.
Appreciate that. I think the last piece that we have to be cognizant of over and over again is we are not the private sector. Like
Right.
we cannot, we will not ever be able to compete. And not just in your department, across the board. We will never be able to compete against the private sector.
Right.
Like, Sean has folks that work in his IT department that are developers. I can use this as an example in I can hire them in the tech world, and they can make a considerable amount of more money just because they work in the private sector.
Yeah.
But they probably enjoy working for Sean, because he's a great manager, and they enjoy that work. In like manner, folks enjoy working in the public sector, in the prosecutor's office, because they enjoy the work and it's fulfilling for them. But they can go work in a private practice and make a considerable amount of more money. I just want us to be cognizant across the board that when we compete with salaries, we will never be able to compete. As someone who's worked in government and
Yeah.
I left government to go work in the private sector to make more money. So we'll never be able to compete against that. I just don't want that to be, oh, well, this is it. We won't be able to compete, and we shouldn't use that as a benchmark when we're doing this either.
I think that's what makes your request reasonable, because you're not asking us to raise the rates to what the private industry is. You're saying,
I was trying to use the salary study
Right.
that you guys
Right.
commissioned. I mean, that's really what I based everything off of, and whatever it rolled in together was a lot of different data inputs, and that's why I didn't just say we need to be at what everybody else is, because that market does fluctuate. When things go down, those
Right.
folks can be laid off, and that is
Yeah.
definitely, when you start saying competing, we do compete because we can bring those folks and provide some kind of stability that industry doesn't necessarily provide.
Right, and that's the challenge with the salary study, is it has private sector data in there, and that's why the fact book is a more palatable thing to look at, because it uses, to a certain degree, other counties, of like size, similar population, so.
I will say one thing though, the fact book, we've gone through it and there are not accurate numbers in it. Like, there was a specific highway position in there that the actual salary is not correct in there. So it's not a complete comparison. And with the wage study, like, yes, private sector was considered for some positions, but it was weighted as well. And so like the counties, what we came up with is still lower than the private sector because of how that weighting was applied, so.
Any other questions on highway? Okay, thank you.
Sure, can I just add?
Absolutely.
For Nick's benefit here, when you talk about the individuals that leave, Megan does do exit interviews with all of these folks as they leave, the ones that have left on their own. Not necessarily the ones that have been asked to leave, that's a different mindset. But
Different exit.
when Megan does interview these folks, they are happy where they're at. They do enjoy working here, they enjoy the benefits that we have. They just have to have more money for their families.
Yeah.
That's the only reason that is almost every single one of them given,
Thank you,
so.
thank you. All right, county facilities, again, 5% increase, and you see in the memo, we've got a 3-year spread for one of those employees to get them to the midpoint. I'm just gonna keep going unless somebody wants to or interject. Superior Court 2, we had various increases requested, Again, we had an issue there in the last year. We lost 2 employees to private law firms for the reasons we've just described. These are paralegal positions, right, Jennifer? Okay. Clerk's office, this was one department where we had 2 positions below midpoint. The ask was for 5%. I don't really have a lot more to say there. Auditor's office, the increase that we've applied is 5%. Treasurer's office, we had 3 positions under midpoint. And again, due to the magnitude of the increase, for 2 of them, we have that spread over 3 years, 5%. Assessor's office, 5%. Recorder's office, everybody's below midpoint. The request to get everybody to midpoint with our 2 plus 3% gets everybody to the midpoint. The surveyor, I think, again, a couple things to note here, and Jennifer, please interject here. We're moving to 40 hours. Everybody in that office is under the midpoint. For whatever reason, we did not get them on their way last year with a 1/3, 1/3. So this is a 3-year spread based on our calculations right now. Did you have anything else to add there?
Just, you already said this, we forgot to point out in this memo that the part of the reason for the larger increase there is taking it from 35 to 48 hours. There's a jump there and a shift in the wage study.
Okay, we're gonna move past the coroner's office for today. The commissioner's office, we have, I think, similar to last year, significantly under the midpoint. Last year, I believe, the commissioners received a 1/3 to try to reach the minimum. That's what we're continuing here, so 2 more years of a 1/3. And an increase of, aging 2% and a 3% merit. For county council, I went ahead and computed what the increases would be, but it appears prior to my arrival that we decided to forego the increase that was suggested last year. So I'm putting in this memo what it would take for us to get a 2% aging of the midpoint and 3% merit. So I'm gonna stop there for a second and make, just to revisit, is that still what the council wishes to do, or do we wanna have a discussion? I didn't go back to last year's minutes to see, or to see what was discussed, but,
I personally don't remember that discussion.
okay. Kenny, you weren't here.
No, I'm
We
sorry.
voted not to put us on the 3rd and then the 3rd to get to minimum.
Right, you just did
Yeah.
the flat increase.
Yeah.
Oh, we
as
did.
elected officials, yes.
Okay.
That was the meeting I missed.
Yes, you were not here.
So if we,
But I do have a question, Sherry, before you move
Yeah.
on. On the 3rd, so you're giving the second 3rd plus a 5%? Is that how I'm reading that?
So it was aged, so then it would be plus the 3% merit would be the
So
discretionary.
the 3rd would be plus a 3%.
well, you just back up and say, where are we this year? Let me compare to the salary study. If the salary study says $15 this year for the midpoint, then I take 2% times 15, and then I add 3% on top of that. Then for the commissioners, I split that in, twos, so that they'll get their second 1/3, which would equate to, $17.50 divided by 2.
Call it Sherry math.
Sherry math.
Sherry.
And then next year, there would be one
There's an
more,
easier way.
one more calculation. There is an easier way, and
It's a much easier way.
at this point, you wanna argue with me, bring it on. So, that's how that works. And I should have told you offline that I thought we'd get together post today and walk through the final calculations, so you can
Is it
Slack.
calculated at, I don't wanna argue with you, but is it calculated anywhere to look at?
Oh, yeah.
It's 97 pages long.
It's not 97 tabs long. There's a lot of formulas.
No, if you print it, it's 97
Oh.
pages.
I'm like, I got
that's
it
because-
Sunday night, and I didn't look at anything, and I'm like, it's a lot to digest, I would like
Yeah.
to look at it.
That's why we only sent out this totals tab, because if you have not spent the last 2 months on this, like we have, it's very overwhelming to look at. And we know where there are like special notes that aren't like written there, like for example, not to pick on commissioners, but like, it looks like they're spread over a third, but we know that it's the 2/3 instead of the third. So if you would like to look at it, I just ask that you sit down with one of us too, because there's things in there that we know are in there that aren't written.
Well, and it's compensation, and I'd just like to make it as private and one-on-one as we can, just because I think that's out of respect for everybody, but that's, happy to do it. EMA, we're gonna move to, does anybody wanna talk about the council then? Because I did not include an increase.
Yeah, we did.
We did not include an increase.
And with that thought, I have one question. Is the on-call pay, is that part of the 600,000 or no? I included it in here. Oh,
Okay.
so we can take that out, and then that brings our grand total to 577,282. Okay.
Okay.
Here's my take on the council. I'll speak for myself, but I would assume a majority, not all of the council would agree. No one is sitting up here to get a paycheck. John just gave me the look like I'm definitely not, so I would concur with that. He sells enough Dixie choppers to take us all to Bahamas. But, I think people put in considerable amount of time. I think you do run the risk that you're gonna put yourself in a position where you're gonna come back in a few years and you're going to have, whether we're sitting here or not, such a low pay disparity. You're gonna have this massive uptick that you're going to try to get people up to,
Yeah.
that you're gonna cause a ruckus. But if you're giving elected officials across the board a pay increase, you either do it for all or you do it for none. Like, that's my philosophy. I think I've said that with anything that we do. What you do for one, you do for all across the board. So if you're giving a pay increase to elected officials, what you do for the council, the commissioners, the clerk, the auditor, it should be even keel across the board. Like, here's what we did, that way there's no kind of back and forth about it. That's my personal
No, I
take,
appreciate
that's my
that.
personal take on it.
So for the council, we only have a midpoint. We don't have a minimum or maximum.
And
So that's something to I just want to point that out.
No, I agree with Aaron, though. Whatever we give elected officials, we ought to be included into that, elected
Okay.
officials.
Okay.
And I agree, we're not doing it for the pay, but, and it's awful hard as the council, we're the only ones that actually can raise salaries. And we can do it for everybody else, but we feel like we shouldn't do it for ourselves, you know. But I think if we're included with everybody as elected officials, then that's part of it.
And, yeah, if there's a consideration on saving cost or being cost conscious, there are other means and methods for this body to look at that. I mean, we're all offered health insurance, and that's something that we've talked about. How do we cut that? We should make the decision as a council to forego any of us having health insurance, and that's a way that we can save costs. I don't know who takes it, but, or if we're saying, hey, us as a commissioner deciding, hey, we're not gonna take health insurance, that's an immediate cost savings to the county, because I think we're Jeff, are we self-insured, if I'm not mistaken? Partially. That's a way that we can save money. I don't know, Debbie, how much money that would save us. That would probably be some number that you would run, but there are means for us to save money other ways as well. I know health insurance has always been one that some councils take, some others don't. I'm talking about across the state, but there are other means to do that as well.
Isn't that, I feel like this comes up every year, isn't that something where like, you have to offer to all, you can't say this department gets it, this department doesn't?
The council never did
Well,
get
you're
it in the
considered
past.
part-time, so technically I'm not sure how that would work in the.
So Jewel, and this is why we're coming back to the coroner EMA, has said that all elected officials are full-time. That's why we've got to circle back on that, so.
But I guess
But
if we,
they're also kind of separate from those
member puts in as a council member could vary on full-time, considered part-time. But I'll take that on, I'll reach out to Jewel, copy you all on the note and asking, what is that consideration? But it's just another means of, if we're looking at this, we're looking at the cost of, in general, of what it is, because I think at one time in research, I don't think the council had insurance. I think that was something that we didn't have, that saved us money. But there are means and methods for us to save money. That's one that we consistently bring up in our discussion about how do we cut costs? Like, there's a direct cost savings to do that, so.
Not to change topics, but, if, I know we excluded council from, I think, the grand totals.
We did.
If that is something the council would like to pursue, then I believe our recommendation would be divided up in thirds because due to the percentage increase being over 10%.
Right.
I don't know where it's gonna end up. I mean, if we end up doing your matrix or whether we do a 5% increase, if it's a 5%, I just figured we'd just be a 5%.
No, that's
with everybody.
helpful.
So I didn't, I don't know about,
Yeah.
cause I don't even know what that increase that you're talking about, that we would have to be
Oh,
one-third.
To get to midpoint, it's well over a 10% increase.
Okay, I
Yeah.
haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Right. So with that, I guess,
Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Debbie.
Yes, I apologize, I was short-staffed today, which is why I had to come back to my office, but, I know I don't have to vote on this, but,
If you could speak up,
oh, okay.
yes, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Is that better? Okay, I'm sorry. That's the first time I've ever been told this way, so you're good. So I just wanna, I believe across the board that the council and commissioners should be part of the elected official pay raise issue. And the reason I say that, guys, is that, there may be a small group that thinks that all of us should be volunteering our time and not doing the work, but everybody works very, very hard. And, one point Aaron made was, true in that people, can you hear me or not?
Yes.
Okay, all right. That, if people are looking at that position, number one, most people don't look at it for the pay, but the bottom line is, the pay needs to be kept current, just like it does with all of the other offices. And that compensation is important for people who are giving their time, for people who are doing the work. And if you, like right now, it appears that we're behind again, and I just think that it's important that you keep that in the commissioner's current and in line, because it's an important position. Whoever serves you deserves pay. Benefits is not my issue, and you guys talk that and decide that yourself, but I think that it's a mistake not giving yourself a raise or decreasing your pay or whatever you're considering doing. Get it where it needs to be, and then it shouldn't even have to be discussed every year. Whatever goes across the board for the rest of the elected officials, it includes all elected officials. So that's just I'm a taxpayer, so I can say that, I'm an elected official, so I can say that too. So I just think it's important. Sometimes I know you wanna say, well, we're gonna save this or that, you're really not saving probably that much money as far as the pay is concerned, but the pay is deserved and should be continued and increased like everyone else.
Thank you very much.
okay, so I think what I'm hearing is, we should all be treated, to your point, Aaron, we're gonna do for one, we do for all. So I think we should update our salary ordinance document with its 97 pages, to get us to the midpoint, and we'll do it over 3 years. And I think we'll still be within the amount that we were supposed to be, so, especially since we took out the on-call pay. Okay. I'm gonna keep moving here, let's see. EMA, pursue later, soil and water, Circuit Court, Superior Court, 1, area plan, all those are at 5%. 4-H or extension and veterans, same thing. I guess the sheriff, what I would say there and what I've tried to put in the memo, those salaries are done outside the first person salary study, as they have their own pay scale based on years of service for each position. Correct me if I'm wrong, or give me a head, like a, go ahead.
Oh, I'm listening.
Okay, and I think we have, I'm gonna turn it to you,
Okay.
because this is where she's taken the baton on the sheriff.
Well, and Brittany, correct me if I'm wrong. It was hard to come up with a, total increase from 2023 to 2024 for several reasons. They moved a bunch of positions either from county general to PS Lit or PS Lit to county general. So it would look like the numbers were, it would look like there was like a large increase or a large decrease, depending on how you looked at it. So let me see. The suggestion is the 5%, but then there's a few individual positions that either like need moved to midpoint, or there's one position in particular that is not being paid pursuant to statute that we need to look at, and those are in PS Lit. So I think I was talking to Debbie, and we can come back to the PS Lit portion in November with a specific amount.
So basically what the sheriff was asking was 5% across the board, and there were, a handful, 4 or 5 positions that he asked have an additional increase.
Yes.
So
There
that's
were in investigations, the matron and then,
Jail.
jail commander.
Yeah.
Joe Commander, yeah.
Got it.
And then there were some of the detectives too.
Investigations, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I believe it's 5 or 6 investigations.
And one thing
And
that.
the only reason that is because I can speak to the Tony Harris Sheriff's Office. I can speak to it a little bit. All we're doing is following the path of other departments, and I say it, and you guys are probably tired of hearing it, but at the same time, these other departments that we're competing with is inside our county, right? So our investigators, if they are on surveillance or whatever, they're spending their nights out from home, watching people that most people wouldn't want to watch, right? So with that said, is our other departments, Lebanon, Whitestown, and Zionsville, are actually paying their investigators more money for that reason, for call-outs and that sort of thing, and they have to go above and beyond. They're on on-call status as well, so we expect more out of them. All we're trying to do is compete with other departments at this point.
Thank you. I guess the only other thing on the sheriff category, and I may need to get with Brittany offline, is just trying to figure out what that projected increase for this year would be for 2025 and 2026, because things are based on seniority. I just took a 3% age and put it in column 25, column 26, and I'm not sure that's accurate. So I think I'll just need your help offline before we finalize what we say those projections are. Does that sound right?
How we can absolutely do
Okay.
that.
All right.
What's your base pay for your first year deputy?
Base pay, what is base pay?
$66? $66.85?
The 66.
Start out at,
I just don't want to get it wrong.
right now, 2023, they start out at 62,937.
62,937.
And then with the new stipends and stuff we approved, that could go up
It could be as much as $2,500 more to the paycheck.
more? Okay, all right. I'm just trying to do some comparisons with us and other locals. I'm just doing comparisons with us and other, trying to see where this will get us. Okay, all right, thank you.
And I think, Aaron, just to speak to that a little bit too, is I think what we'll see is what are the other municipalities doing this year? And the next year, we're gonna have to look at it pretty hard, only because we don't know what they're doing.
Because everybody's going through the budget process
It
now.
yeah,
and
it sounds
asking
like
for,
they're gonna get raised, but it's still pie in the sky until that actually happens.
I think Zionsville's leading the pack currently at 70,000 as the base, up to 76
Moving along, I guess, I think I don't think we've skipped a department, but
Extension.
I meant, yeah, did I said 4-H and I should have said extension, or did I?
It just wasn't on the list.
Yeah, we realized.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's consistent with everything else we've said, get them to 5%. We're applying a 5% amount, as we discussed. So, we still wanted to talk about other policy considerations, as part of our work. On-call pay, our recommendation, that is Jennifer's and my recommendation, is that the highway department and the facilities department should be allowed to have on-call pay, which would result in a $10,400 expense for each department for the current year, computed as $200 a week times 52 weeks. If the council agrees, that policy would need to be formally drafted by the commissioners, I believe, by the end of November of '23. Does anybody have any comments on on-call pay? $20,800. Okay. Another policy consideration that we wanted to discuss at the council level, limit on merit pay spread. We heard from several people and just in discussions between Jennifer and me. For 2025 and beyond, we would like the council to consider a possible limitation on the ability of a department head and/or elected official to take merit pay from one funded position and pass it on to another funded position. Possible limits might involve a 0.5% or a 1% maximum merit pay shift from one position to another. We don't want to ask for a vote on this issue this year, but we want to give the department heads a heads up in case we might find that to be amenable to the rest of the council. And the thought there being, if we're going to try to keep in alignment in some way, shape, or form with the salary study, if we limit that taking from one and giving to another, then perhaps we avoid some of these getting outside the guardrails of minimums and maximums for people. So, any other words on that about what our thought was there?
You've heard from several on this. To me, it's a slippery slope. You can tell the department head, because a majority of the department heads that they are, maybe fall up under the commissioners, maybe appoint them. Just when we get into the boundaries of dictating to
Yeah.
elected officials, and I agree that we need to have policies in place for certain things.
Yeah.
You just get into a very slippery slope dictating to elected officials who were selected by a majority of the people in the county
Yeah.
on certain things. And I just remember conversations in the past of staying in lanes. I would just say with all of this, I just think there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen in the ensuing months, going into next year's budget discussion. There's a lot to unpack here.
Sure.
There's a ton to unpack, and I think you all have done tremendous work. It's just-
Thank you.
I don't know.
No, there's a lot here,
There's
and
a lot.
this was an item for discussion, and there's no need for us to decide on this today, but I certainly thought we ought to at least broach it so that maybe we can, again, have some more in-depth discussion with department heads and elected officials to get their input, but it would appear that in certain instances, over a period of years, that some people were taking their bucket and throwing it on one or two people, and then they're outside the.
Then there's a disparity.
And then we've got, another issue that we're supposed to sort of help with HR align on this path. We spent this money on the salary study, and so again, but I appreciate what you're saying. Anybody else have other comments? We don't have to decide anything
We
today.
just wanted to put this on everyone's,
Right.
oh my gosh.
Radar.
Radar, thank you. So that it could be something we consider moving into next year instead of,
Right.
waiting
We
until
gotta
July
start
to
somewhere.
discuss it.
Yes, yes.
Right.
I have a comment. Councilwoman Ritchie, Councilwoman Hofstadter, and all the department heads, that there are hours upon hours upon hours that went into this work that she just discussed here on a very minute level. If you are listening, if you are in this room and you have lived in Indiana for the last 10 to 15 years, there was a surplus in state government of $6 billion. That's my money and that's your money. Those legislatures over the last several years have decided that, man, we've taken a lot of money from the taxpayers of the state of Indiana. We need to give that money back. And one of the biggest things they did this past January, almost a year ago, Governor Holcomb said, we need to do something for our Indiana State Police. And back in January, a year ago, coming up on a year ago, they were making $54,000 a year. Governor Holcomb said, we got to get them to $70,000. $36 million it was going to add to the budget, take out of the budget, $36 million. At that time, they had right at about $5 billion in reserves. Our money, you guys, it's our money. And he said, we're going to give these people what they're deserving of, and it passed. It went through. There's now about $2 billion in that reserves in the state of Indiana. $2 billion, that's my money, that's your money. If you live and work in Indiana, it is your money. Now the legislature, the people that we elect, they get to have the responsibility of deciding how that money is going to be spent. And I would like to think they do it wisely. We have kicked this can here in Boone County, Indiana, down the road time and time and time and time again. The very last paragraph on here, consider and discuss the impact of using cash reserves to shore up a multi-year spread of compensation increases. Specifically, instead of waiting 2 or 3 years to get employees to the minimum or the maximum, pay it all in 1 year with the cash reserves. There are cash reserves here in Boone County, Indiana, my money, and again, if you live and work in Boone County, Indiana, you pay taxes, that's our money. Let's give it back to the employees of Boone County, Indiana, who are deserving of it. There are, what, $10, $11 million in reserves? Do you know the number right offhand? There's several $million in the Boone County reserve. I am, and I'm going to say tired. I'm tired of kicking this can down the road over and over and over again. You keep making the comment, let's wait until next year. Let's have more discussion. Stop the discussion, man. We are adults in the room here. We were elected to these positions. We get to make these decisions, and sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. And I say we make the decision now, we get this thing done, take those reserves that we have in the same way that Governor Holcomb and the state legislature did with that, from a $6 billion level, we're now down to $2 billion. I'm comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable with spending this money right now. We spent thousands of dollars on a wage study. Why? If we're not going to use it, if we're not going to take their advice, why?
Thank you, Council.
Why? Get it done now.
No.
Let's do it today.
But I don't totally agree with you, Kevin, because if we look at what you're talking about doing, we can spend down our reserve, we're gonna be in the negative. We're actually running a negative budget now. It's not like we're trying to do something, that we got so much, we don't have $1 billion. But we do have some excess monies that we're trying to spend on the windows, and we're using those funds. But we also don't want to spend monies that then suddenly we're going to have to lay people off in 3 years. If we don't do this properly, we're going to be in that position. And no one wants to be laid off, and I don't want to lay anybody off. So I think we need to do raises, and I agree with you 100% on that side of it, but I want to make sure that we do it in such a way that we're not going to have to lay people off in the future. So,
This is a portion of the budget that needs to be sustainable through the next 5
Agreed.
to 7 years.
I'm reminded how a couple summers ago, Councilman Aaron Williams in his first summer of budget hearings. We set the table up in the middle of that room, and he proposed that all the deputy sheriffs here in Boone County, Indiana, get a $5,000 a year raise. And I'm sitting there at the table and I'm thinking, man, this is gonna be discussion, it's probably gonna last an hour. And within 5 minutes of having a discussion with Marcia, God rest her soul, Marcia said, yeah, we can do this. We can do it. And within 5 minutes, we voted on it to give those deputy sheriffs their $5,000 a year raise. It's not $1 billion, but we have several $1 million in that cash reserves that, in my humble opinion, that we can take that money and make it work.
Debbie, where was we at on our balance? We were up like at 40%, now we're 25, 26%. In
Correct.
this 1 year, we went down that much?
Correct.
Because we're deficit spending.
Um,
So take that out 5 years, where are we at?
Right, I mean, you'd have to, if you're using reserves this year, you're gonna have to count on having those reserves again next year to sustain what you used this year, plus the increase for next year.
But it
So,
was,
I mean, and each year it goes up, we don't always have those reserves.
Boone County is the fastest, what we were told last month, Boone County is the fastest growing county in the state of Indiana. That's what we were told last month. And I'm gonna assume that it's true.
But we're not gonna
Now, with that
see-
growth coming into Boone County, Indiana.
But we're not gonna see it for several years.
I understand.
All right,
I
let's take a
Get it
pause.
done,
No,
just
I-
do it today, stop kicking
I-
the can down the road.
I appreciate that, and I wanna just go to what you said, Kevin. The last item on the memo was consider and discuss the impact of using these cash reserves to shore up multi-year spread of compensation increases. So, thank you for getting it out there. We were gonna get there. And I wanna make sure we have a healthy discussion around the fact that there are reserves, and according to my calculation, which hasn't been audited by our auditor, but I'm gonna feel, pretty confident that it's roughly 130 grand that we would have to spend out of reserves, and it would get rid of, I believe, the entire multi-year spread element, but for the counselors, which I did not include in the, she can probably tell me the number in a minute. Let's call it 150. Would we add another 20? Anyway, let's call it 150. So I just think it's worth a healthy discussion. I think we know where Kevin stands. I think if we have reserves, we should at least have the discussion. And that's all I'm gonna say at the moment. Do you have thoughts?
No,
So-
where do we need to?
So let's just call it 150 for fun, because we're having fun. I said, let's call it 150 for fun, because we're having fun, but, I'm gonna ask Baker Tilly, or Debbie, what would 150 out of our reserves then equate to in terms of that standing balance? So where are we now versus where would we be, just for informational purposes?
I mean, we've already got 600 in there as a contingency, and that leaves you with, the right paper here,
Which account are we talking about, Debbie?
general, I'm talking about general.
Okay.
So that's where we put the contingency, because that's where the bulk of your salaries come from.
And we haven't yet addressed insurance or HSA.
HSA.
So it's a different line.
Well, right, but
Just
it's
wanna make
general,
sure that-
so it's all gonna
It's
fall,
all-
we're setting the stage here for,
you have 600,000 to deal with all of those
Everything.
bullet points.
And if we do the 150, though, we can do it, just have to do an additional, right?
just a simple nod, yes or no. No?
Yes, you would, I don't,
Is it preferred? No.
No,
I
I
prefer-
appreciate what everybody's,
I don't like doing additionals for salaries, only because those should be set at budget time, and we should stick to that.
but I would also say that, and again, believe it or not, I wanna do the right thing, and I think we're trying to do the right thing in compensation as a subject matter. I think we're trying to do the right thing for everybody that's working for the council, so I feel good about that. Now, how we slice and dice this extra piece is another matter to discuss, but,
So
go ahead.
currently, with the $600,000 contingency and everything to the budget, your budget's out of balance, meaning you're already using 1.3 million in reserves with an end cash balance, operating balance of about 37%. So if we put another 150 there, of course, it's gonna drop it.
To what?
Maybe another percentage point, that would mean that you would be about 1.5 million out of balance. Maybe 1.52 million out of balance, and that would drop your operating balance to probably closer to 36%.
Okay.
And Susan, that out of balance is due to the window project.
Partially the windows, yes, I mean, if the windows are $1 million and you're 1.52 out, there's, 500,000
Difference.
give or take there, that's other additional spending that's outside of the anticipated revenue.
And we
I
do
guess-
have a track record of having about $1 million left over at the end of each year, so.
I mean, with the
We're not
reserves, and then you
spending,
spend
yeah.
reserves, so yeah, you may end up with a higher operating
Okay.
balance than we're estimating, so yes.
And I think
I guess another,
Oh, sorry, the million for the windows, we won't have that next year, right?
Right,
Okay.
unless you replace it with another project next year.
Okay.
the only other thought I want to add before everybody else weighs in is just, can we just all agree that the effort that's been expended this year has resulted in a pretty healthy number, and that it would be my opinion that not every employee, I don't think the employees are expecting, there's not an expectation that you get 5% every year. I mean, I almost feel like this is a true up this year to get us to what we believed was a valid navigational point, that is the salary study. Now, if we're gonna stick to that, there's gonna be an expense every year to try and stick with it, but we don't have to. We didn't go with the salary study's recommendation for the aging, but we felt like the compensation package was fair and equitable this year. So I just wanna throw that out as a data point, because I don't believe even the projections that I've put together it's a 3% add, not a 5%. I mean, I don't think we're setting an expectation here that this is gonna be a rolling 5 to 7% increase every year. People know better than to think that, I believe, in terms of the economy, sorry.
Also, just one other thing, we're talking about funding, not actual pay.
Yeah.
Because when we were going through this, there is a difference between the two, and that's what is part of what is contributing to our cash reserves each year too. So.
But I also think too, when we're talking cash reserves, I am all about paying our employees what their department head feels they deserve to be paid. As for my office, they are well paid. They do a lot of work. But Nick is over here, and I'm gonna say this, crying the blues, because he has projects that he can't fund. Why aren't we funding those out of our cash reserves? We don't need to fund the pay out of cash reserves. We need to fund projects, because that's what the taxpayers see on the outside. Those taxpayers, and I'm one of them, probably already think we make too much anyway, and you hear that all the time. Oh, you work for the county, you make all kinds of money, blah, 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 blah. Well, it is what it is. But Nick has projects, he's sitting over there that he can't get funded. Why aren't we funding those out of our cash reserves?
And it's a one-time expense.
And it's a
not
one-time
a-
expense.
And 30-year
I
expense.
mean, personally, we cannot sustain, and I keep saying that, we can't
Can
sustain
we
it
get her
year after
microphone
year.
at least? Hear what she has to say?
Oh, I thought you were, if you were giving, cause I was gonna concur.
I think
She's saying stuff that's just not true, but if you wanna go ahead and carry on, that's fine.
Yeah, so my take on it is, I think I've said that multiple times, is like, how do we fund projects? Like, I've made that point multiple times, that there are projects that we should be funding more than anything, because if you get them done, I think Nick has talked about roads, and if you fund a road project, then the maintenance on it, you don't have to do as much maintenance to it as well. So with that, I think it's been said that our budget is out of balance. I think, Susan, you told us at the very beginning of our budget workshop, salaries are always going to be our largest expense. They will increase every year, and with that, that's the one thing that we need to probably keep top of mind, that it is the expense that
that is reoccurring. Kevin gave a passionate speech, so context is key and critical. 2 years ago, we were losing members of our sheriff's department at an unprecedented rate. I spent, it was my first year on the council, probably about 15 or 20 hours studying intensely and researching what was going on, and spent a considerable amount of time with the sheriff's department and others researching on what was going on, and talked to every member of the council to figure out what could be done. And while it may have passed in quote-unquote record time, it was not without lengthy discussion. The same thing happened at the State House of the Indiana State Police getting their pay increase. That has been an ongoing discussion at the State House for almost 2.5 years. That is not something that happened haphazardly, where the state legislator just said, we want to give a budget, we want to pass, this pay increase. So all that being said, I believe Sherry started today's discussion with, this is the first time we've had an in-depth salary with Jennifer review. So I think you all took this, I'm calling it a burden, because it's a lot of work you've done in 94 pages of
There's an
spreadsheets.
opportunity.
It's an opportunity, but it's a lot of work. I think you took it on probably about 2 months ago. So a lot of work has been done in 2 months. So I personally refute the topic of, we've been kicking this can down the road forever and ever. There's a lot of work that's been done. And I will go back to my personal point of, while there's been a lot of work that has been done, I personally believe there's still some discussion that needs to happen, and not just making a decision and saying, oh, yeah, there's reserves, let's just spend it. Because, as Susan has so eloquently told us in her professional expertise, our budget is out of balance. And while we have a window project now, who knows what's going to come up next? We have an antiquated, while it's the most beautiful courthouse in the state, anything can come up. We don't know. And to Honorable Crumb's point, there are other projects in the county that I'm sure our taxpayers would probably want to see. So I have my own personal thoughts on what should be done, but I would defer to our other council members before I give those on their thoughts on this.
Can I interject before the rest of the council, if they do want to weighs in? I guess there's a couple things that come up. First of all, thanks for the comments to date. I would just say, as accounting in my background, that one, and again, to be honest, I feel good about what we did. So I feel good about, I think that employees feel good about what we've done, and I hope that we can continue it. But as it relates to this other hot topic, which we sort of knew was going to be a hot topic, that is, do we, as fiduciaries, we need to ask the question, do we want to spend this all in 1 year or not? So again, we're doing our job. I feel good about that. Just to let you guys know how I'm feeling. But if we do postpone those payments and do them over multi-years, there is a cost to that as well. I mean, it is not a significant cost on 150, but there is a time value of money, an interest cost, if you will. So if we paid it all in one, we would avoid aging that increase again. So I'm just throw that out for the council. There is a cost. It is not a significant cost relative to the total, but there is a cost by kicking it down the road, kicking the can down the road, to borrow your comment there, Kevin. I don't think it's significant, so I'm not gonna spend time on it, but I just wanna point that out. Secondly, we're gonna be undergoing a capital improvement plan, or I'm gonna call it a strategic plan here soon with Baker Tilly. I believe that is gonna help inform us much better as we move forward, so that we can have a little bit better handle on what our expenses look like in the coming years, and how we're going to manage the funds that are coming in, and how we're gonna disperse them in a much more prioritization, strategic, thought-out way. And I think it's relevant to throw that out, so that as we all sit here and say, what are we gonna do? We've got needs over here, we've got needs over here, we have a decision to make on whether or not this is gonna happen in 1 year or multiple. I think it's important for the public to know that I think we will be better able to make these decisions after the capital improvement plan / strategic plan is completed. Is that?
Yeah, cause I know, like we had the windows this year, and there will be something, I'm sure, next year, but with our capital improvement plan, we're gonna be in a much better position, I think, figuring out how to fund those things. So, I agree with what Sherry said earlier, like, we're trying to get people in line with this wage study that we spend a significant amount of money on. And it's important, like, if we were to, fund those increases now instead of a third, or the 2/3, this is a one-time thing. And next year, it may only be whatever the recommended aging is. It may not be 2% mandatory, 3% discretionary. It may be 2% mandatory, and that's it. Or it may be 2% mandatory and 1% discretionary. It'll depend on where we are at that time. So I think it's just important if we do this, this is a one-time thing to get everyone in line with our wage study.
So let's talk about the decisions that we need to make today pertaining to this discussion that we just had. We're talking about, from your perspective, we're talking about the increase, and we're talking about the percent that is cost of living versus merit. Are we ready to move forward with those votes? Is there any further discussion? Apologize for that. Is there any further
What
discussion?
were the two set up against look at them?
Are we at the place to start making a decision related to the 5% increase and the percent merit versus percent cost of living?
We've got some things that we need to go back with the EMA and some other things that so I don't know that we can finalize, but I would like to, it looks like everything is, all the suggestions and recommendations is a 5% raise. My recommendation is we start with that next month, build on it if we so choose, but at least get that 5% locked down, and then we need to make a motion on our HSA and stuff like that too, right?
It's not just 5%.
I was wanting to start with the 5%, and then there's gonna be more if you go down through every one of these, right? But it's a minimum of 5% is what it looks like you're saying on most all of it, plus some on others.
Not the people who we've broken up into a third, or
Right.
2/3 and 2/3.
Right.
So however the motion would be structured.
And some are, part of that, some people are asking just for 5% on 2023, and some of it is the 2% aging plus 3%, which the math is different.
Technically,
I can't explain it, but it is.
5.006.
So
Well-
do we need to go
So-
through different categories? Go ahead, Councilman.
I need
So,
specific
yeah,
numbers.
Right.
so,
And-
yeah, that's,
Because what we'll have to do, I mean, I'll just break it down to you, we have to take this $598,000 and we have to plug it into the clerk, the auditor, area plan, so I need specifics.
Yep, and we could do it for everyone except for coroner and AMA right now.
but have we got it in such a way, I mean, I know you've got it here, but like what she's,
Well, is coroner's fine, coroner and first deputy are fine, it's just their run rates that you're talking about, right?
well,
Because we
yeah,
could
that
turn
whole,
into an
Yeah,
hour.
that whole
which they
mix,
don't-
that whole
That
mix.
does not include the raises, they don't get the 5% on those,
Okay,
on the,
well, just
Run
budgeting
rate.
the hourly, that's the,
and that may have to be an additional depending on what you guys decide.
What has to get done today?
sorry.
What'd you say, Sharon?
I'm just gonna ask Debbie, what has to get done today legally? What are those things that have to get done today?
I need specific numbers, because we'll have to go back and put that 5% plus a third divided by half, however you wanna do it, into each payroll line
See,
in every fund. So it needs to be pretty specific,
Versus a salary ordinance that's not due
until
until
December.
December.
That will
So
be in our December meeting.
those are two different exercises.
And the salary ordinance mainly breaks down to the departments and how they're paying each person in their department. So that's, I mean, and then you guys approve it at the December meeting.
Aaron, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I have, Lisa
Go ahead.
Berger, clerk. I just want to ask this question. So like, when you referred to your fund money, as working here, like my first deputy, I took her $1,000 off. Is there, do you guys do a report or anything like that, that of the actual offices that gave money back? Like I know Auditor Crum gave some money back, I gave, like, are you guys gonna, you guys keep talking about, I mean, the ones that actually took.
You're talking about on that second to last meeting where we're like, hey, I'll give this money back, I'll give this money
Yeah.
back. I think
And then-
Jennifer wrote them all down.
I don't have that notebook with me today, but I do have that total,
I
yeah.
just didn't know if there, I mean,
Yeah, I wrote it all down,
I don't,
that's
I'm
the
new
one
at this, and
notebook
I don't always wanna be the giver if that's not gonna pay off anymore.
No, there was,
Fair.
there was some from Debbie, there was some from you, there was some from the commissioners, Jennifer, yeah.
Okay.
And I have the totals too, that's just the one thing I missed this morning.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So,
I know what you mean,
Probation, that was another one.
and I get the complexities of it. And I know what you all have done, and you probably, I'm not saying probably, you understand it better how to do it. I guess for simplification, just me personally, I'm more inclined to say, is it possible for us to, can we give everyone what was the raise that we gave everyone last year? Let me start with that. Do you remember?
Two.
We gave everyone a 2% raise?
2% across the board.
2%, okay. Have we ever given a 5% raise?
It was 3% per, so it was.
That's right. You're right.
Conceivably
It was conceivably 5%. Thank you for that. I'm inclined to say, can we give a 5% raise across the board and set a discretionary amount of, this is you have to give a mandated, department heads have to give at least 2% or 3% discretionary, 2% or 3% mandated, and the rest discretionary. And then, can we come back and work on, I would love to see the work, because I think, I don't know what Kenny is saying, I don't wanna put words in your mouth. Try to figure out, if there's a lot of like, 3% here, 5% here, plus a third here, 2/3, plus add a pickle and a sandwich, and you get this.
You guys understand it at such a deeper level because
And
you worked on it.
You worked on it, but I
that-
wanna see it, I wanna understand it and see it, but I still think, outside of my understanding and seeing it, I think Debbie and her staff will still have to go through every line and know it in detail right here. Am I saying that right? You need to still, line by line, go through every single one, and then you gotta break it out of that
We
500.
both will. So Susan will do it on her side, we'll do it on our side, and we'll compare, and hopefully we match. So, I mean, we only have 10 days.
So we're gonna kinda need your 94 pages.
Yeah.
Well,
So we need your
first of all,
94 pages
let's just
today.
back up. 94 pages is if you have the improper printer settings. It is 6 tabs. It is doable. And I guess while I've got the floor, we just spent hours of our time. And I know what each of these positions' percentages is. I will get that to you today if that's what we need to do.
'Cause we
I
have
do
the
not like,
yellow line.
with all due respect, Aaron, I don't like the idea of putting in 2 months of our life. I did not keep a track of the hours, and I'm glad, because it would be an obscene number. And because we haven't done it, we did it, and I want you to understand it, but, I don't wanna do a peanut butter approach after what was a Herculean effort by people in this room, people outside this room, because it needed to get done. So I think I know what you're saying. You're saying it could be that we could mathematically still get there with a 5% plus something that gets us to 600,000, and then we give you the details. We can do that, I guess, but I don't want the people in this room, the employees that work for the county, to think that we just did all this for naught, because that takes away the effort that was expended, you know,
So how would you recommend that we proceed here?
all due respect, I didn't get this until Sunday night. Respect. I understand and appreciate the Herculean effort.
Yeah, I sent it 12:30 on Sunday, just so you know. I mean, Sunday night and 12:30 are different. Okay,
I didn't open this until Sunday night.
okay.
I have a normal day job.
Yep.
I'm not retired. I didn't get this. I appreciate the Herculean effort. Like you, there are multiple projects
Absolutely.
being worked on. I did call, as I've done before every council meeting, multiple elected officials to get, hey, help me understand.
Sure.
I know some of them only participated in one meeting, help me understand. And I asked even in today's discussion,
Yeah.
would a 5% across the board raise work for you
Yeah.
and your staff? Of which no one said no. I said, hey, will that work for today's discussion?
Right.
They're in the room, so if I'm misspeaking, they could all speak now. Someone can speak up and say, that won't work.
Yeah.
Nick, that doesn't work for you,
I
right?
will speak to that.
Hold on, I'm not done. What I'm saying here right now is, I don't have enough information. I'm not saying I don't trust your information, but I got the information, and I do have, because I've talked about the wage and salary study and
Yeah.
everything, and I'm like, okay, I got all this, there's a ton of data behind it. I'm
Right.
saying, hey, we're being told the budget is out of balance, there's a lot of questions. I'm saying, can we give it 5% pay, the highest percentage that we've ever given in this council's history, across the board, and work on this? No one's saying not pay the employees or give them an increase. No one's saying that by any stretch. I'm not saying, oh, your work is or not.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. But I feel like, it's like, oh, well, we did all this work, just accept it and go with it. I just can't. That's what I feel like. I feel like
No,
you're telling us, like,
Yeah.
we did all this work over the last 2 months. Take what we're saying, accept it, and let's move forward.
Yeah.
I can't.
And I'm sorry that you felt that way, and I'll let you speak in a second, but the memo was an overview, and then, and again, the idea was that we would discuss each department. We didn't get into details because I didn't hear a lot of questions, so I'm just explaining my side of what you just described, because there's a lot more effort within each of those departments that were highlighted in that 5-page memo. So it sounds like you want to get, I thought the time for that was at the council table. And what you're suggesting is, no, I don't have enough time and I don't have enough data to discuss. I mean, because what we could have done, and we could still do, is go through each of those departments and say, Aaron, this is what we did on Superior Court, because they didn't have a 5% raise. They had something that ranged from, it was not 5%, it was started at 6 and went all the way to 12% to get them where they needed to be. And again, we have that data, we have that detail, and we can have that discussion. And I just wanna make sure you know that. That's what I was thinking was gonna happen today when we went through each department. So we didn't, and now we're having this discussion, so.
And that's fair, because,
Okay.
and you and I did have I think almost an hour phone conversation, where I think in that conversation, I brought up questions.
Yes, you did.
Which you started to address. I said, Sherry, what is the 3-year projection?
Yes.
There are things that you said Jennifer and I hadn't thought about these.
Absolutely.
So now they're coming up. I think I raised some new questions today. What about new positions that are going to come? What is the historical context?
Sure.
There's still more questions. I'm asking these questions
Yes.
because, once again, the county, the budget isn't balanced. These
Right.
are legitimate questions, and for us just to say, yes, let's
Got
just do this. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, President Charlotte, you gave us some examples in the last council meeting where there's some government entities that are saying, hey, we may have paid too much to employees, or I think maybe Zion, well, some others, or former Auditor Barry, they gave some insight on pay that may have been too high for folks. But you said something related to that degree, so.
Jennifer, you had a good point.
I think for everyone above the midpoint, we can say it's the 5%. Part of the reason we dug into this was to look at the people below the midpoint, because 5% is not gonna get people below minimum to minimum. 5% for people below midpoint is not gonna get people, not everyone to midpoint. Some of them it gets them to midpoint, but there's a bunch that it doesn't. So that's part of the reason why we dug into this, is because if we continue to just say 3% across the board, 5% across the board, we're gonna continue to be out of line with this wage study. And so that's why we did this deeper dive into those people below midpoint. So we can absolutely say everyone above midpoint 5% for calculation purposes. It's
Okay.
the people below that.
And there were-
Those are the kind of action items that we want to
And there were-
identify.
According to my calculations, there were 89 positions under midpoint. That includes 3 commissioners, sorry, there were 83 under midpoint, 7 of which are counselors, 3 of which are commissioners. So again, now that we've decided that we want the counselors to be a part of this, that's 83 positions that were under midpoint. So the effort that Jennifer describes, you could say there were 83 to start with, and then of that, 23, or now, if we include the council, it'd be 30 positions qualified for a 30-year, or a 3-year spread, a multi-year spread. So, I'm just saying, yeah, I just clarifying what Jennifer said, that the effort was intense, and we can go through each of those, Jeff, you've been standing there for a while, what did you have?
No, I just want to say that if you don't address those under the midpoint, then you have basically said that the salary study is not of any value, and we're not going to use it. Those are the things that are going to cause us more problems than whether somebody gets a 5% raise if they're at the upper end of this range. So if we don't do that, we are risking losing a lot of those types of employees.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that, right now are already feeling that pressure from the outside.
Yeah.
So I think that's number one. Another thing I want to address while I'm standing here is the third, and I can't do this without removing the commissioners from it, so I'm just going to say what I'm going to say, and I really don't care that it applies to us, but you're really pushing that effort down a 2-year path, like Kevin said. You're really not gaining anything by doing that. You're moving it out by 2 years. So if the idea is that we want to just protect the cash balance over 2 years, let's do it with the project you talked about, the window project. I can get us a loan for 3 years and spread those payments out over 3 years. We can invest in our employees now, keep that cash balance at a certain level.
Okay,
That's
thank
a-
you.
I wouldn't take that alone.
I just need some numbers, people.
So we can
Do you want to go through every?
motion for 5% for those above midpoint, and then we can look at below midpoint after.
Or we can,
I need specific numbers.
I know, I've got 'em.
So I need specific positions
I've got them.
and specific numbers that are gonna be put in
Um,
and you guys have to vote on all of them.
For above midpoint?
Yeah, you guys have to vote on them.
Or to,
If they're, because they'll all be different.
to Aaron's point about wanting more detail, and again, I'm sorry that things didn't get to the council a week ahead of time. I mean, I agree with you, that is a short window with which to dive deep. So here's the thought. Are we able to do the 5% above, and that's the only specific thing, then say that we've got whatever that adds up to, which we have that somewhere on one of the 6, not 97 tabs. Can we then say that the council approves up to 600,000, and then we get with you in the next, and you have 10 days, but we get with you
Well,
today,
Right.
and we tell you specifics, and in that meantime, Aaron, for example, wants to dive deep into these numbers. I can sit with Aaron and we can go through each department that has something other than the 5% above, for which we're gonna have a dialogue and discussion, but we're covered for the 598, or we can't. I'm just wondering, is that an option so that Aaron gets the detail and the discussion that he wants, and maybe there's others.
No, I mean, kind of the details that
Yeah.
we're talking about, I think, is kind of what Debbie needs right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It would have been nice to have that so that we knew what we was actually approving.
Sorry.
You guys do know
We
it.
say we have 7 days, but we
Right,
also
no,
have
No.
I
other
understand.
things to
I
do.
know.
Normal work, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, your
and
normal work
this is
stuff.
a lot to go and have to
I,
calculate and input these numbers. So
Yeah.
really, I need to leave here today
okay,
knowing what is approved for each of those positions
Okay.
so that we can go back and get started on
yeah,
it.
I've got all day. I think it's been mentioned, I'm retired and I don't have any soybeans to go farm. So I'm more than happy to. I don't know how long we wanna do this meeting. I'm more than happy to go through it right now.
I mean,
Well, I missed the 10 o'clock meeting, so guess I'm here for the rest of the day.
What do you think?
So even for the people above midpoint, you need us to go through each department. So
Yes,
like,
because I need a specific number.
so like, can I use,
You can't leave it up to us to determine
And I
what that
didn't,
number needs to be.
didn't
input.
envision that anyway, but appreciate
can I
the
use
specific.
your office then?
It needs to be done.
No, she's saying as
She has
an
a
It has to be
vote on,
voted
like,
on.
we have
As
to
an
sit here.
No, I know, I meant,
To
She
print.
meant as
You
an
have to
example.
approve all those numbers.
I meant like your office's numbers.
Oh, yeah. But that's just gonna be your 5%,
Right.
the ones that are.
Like your whole office is above midpoint.
Right.
And so, do I need to go through this like line by line and say 5% is $3,000?
No, so you'll just, auditor's office is a flat 5%.
Okay,
I mean, that's how you have to do it, but for those that are below the mid that you're trying to get to the mid.
right.
With the third divided by 2.
Got it all right here,
Okay.
but,
We need those positions to be voted on
Okay.
by the council.
but that doesn't get Aaron where he needs to be,
No.
or Kenny, or, bless you. So,
Well, I think we just go through them and we talk through them and let's get it going.
all right,
I've just got something. Why if we approve this, but we agree for the next 2 years, there's no raises? Does that compute make the difference of the money?
Well, then that puts us behind the wage study again if we're not.
Well, but someplace, we've gotta compromise all this and get, we just can't keep going to debt more. That's federal government, they print money. But somehow we gotta get, I agree, everybody needs to get to the midpoint.
you
Do
do.
we take away from the ones that are above midpoint?
No, and we looked at it, I think, I'd say this with an asterisk next to it. The 5% for the people over midpoint, I don't think it pushes anyone over the maximum, I don't think.
It doesn't.
And what we have to keep in mind, like, is even if, again, we do this year, we may need to age it next year, so maybe it's 2%, but nothing else next year.
But, I mean, we go
Just,
through every one of these lines, you know, and we're still gonna be down to the decision, do we do this, or we do it 5%? That's all, to me, I mean, it's where we're at.
Right, and the 5%, if we just do 5%, that it does not,
Get anybody up with
it doesn't get, there's a good chunk of people, it doesn't get them to the
I
midpoint.
understand.
And it doesn't get people below the minimum still to the minimum.
How many people are below the minimum?
Let's see. Not including us,
So we're below the minimum?
hold on. Yes, we don't have a minimum, we just have a
So,
mid.
so can we not look at those hourly employees? Those are the ones I feel we should be concerned about, getting to the midpoint. Those are the ones that are threatening to leave, are those hourly employees that are not at the midpoint.
So can we just not do them?
Now, I'm just throwing suggestions out there.
Because I mean, when I tell you, it's,
There's
go through
six,
every, there's
sorry.
six people.
Not including us, below the minimum,
So do you know the departments?
yes.
I'm assuming the majority are on highway.
Below the minimum,
Yeah.
surveyor, her first deputy, coroner, us, but we don't have a minimum,
Commissioners.
and then the 3 commissioners are below the minimum.
Extension has
Oh, and, wait, extension is below the minimum?
2 people.
And so if we gave a 5% across the board, they would be below the minimum.
So for example, the surveyor, to get her to the minimum, she would need a, 26 grade. So 5% does not get them there,
Not anywhere close.
not anywhere close.
How's the server, so is that where that third comes in?
Part of it
Yeah.
is we didn't, she should have been on the third we did last year, and
She did get the third last year.
Okay.
Yeah,
She got 5,000.
She got 5,000 last year, so, she was included in that.
So is that number right there? She got
let me
third?
come back to that. Well, it's
Oh, I
still,
told.
So that means it should be, so that means that number is less than that.
well,
Okay, it's fine.
can I show this to you? This is what we have as where she's currently. And she needs that much to minimum.
But shouldn't it be a third of that? Because if she got,
I think it should just be half-ish now.
How much did she
It
need
was
to get?
5,000 last year, should be 5,000 this year, 5,000 next year to get the third.
So what's the 5%?
Huh?
What would be five? You need to take half of that and add
Right,
it to
hold
hers.
on, let's go to corners, cause I know that, where'd you go?
But the quarter wouldn't be applicable,
Why?
because you said the
He was
server,
a third.
did the corner get his third last year?
Yeah.
Yes.
So like, look, his percentage increase, to get him there,
Where's he at now?
here. This would be to get him to minimum,
But if he got his third last year,
right, but to get him there, cause you're saying is 5% enough to get people below the minimum, to their minimum, it's not.
that's his midpoint,
No, remember how I said, it says two minimum,
right? What's the minimum?
that is his minimum.
We
I know
put it in the
says- Remember I
spreadsheet.
said there are things in here that you won't know, we know that his is calculated to the minimum,
But see, that's what I'm saying, we don't know that, because if this is what he's making now.
right?
That's actually wrong, because she said he got his third last year.
That's what the salary study says that his salary is right now.
I get what the salary study is
Jerry's
saying, but what is it
No,
actually?
sorry, salary
This
ordinance.
thing.
I don't know.
But I thought he got,
11,000 last year.
so that's
I don't-
wrong.
Was
I
it third?
agree.
That is what the
you're
salary
saying
ordinance
about
says the
the-
salary is.
but-
Can I have that?
But
So that's
you hate
wrong.
to keep
then.
going in debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand.
What
No,
we're
I
having
understand.
And then,
I agree. I mean, I
So that means
understand what
he'd
you're
be
saying.
at-
I do.
He'd go for $50,000.
That's what the salary ordinance says.
Did it pass it?
when you're talking figures like what you're talking, it's above my head.
All right. It's okay.
Yeah, so that's correct, that's where it is
understand.
now,
So then the surveyor is right.
that's the minimum.
I get you're saying that's a minimum, but is it the midpoint?
No, ignore that for, so there are certain ones you have to ignore these up here. This is why I was saying we did not send this out. We, look here, he's to the minimum, so that is his minimum number. So you were asking is 5% enough? No, it's not,
Okay.
for some people below the minimum, to get them to the minimum.
And what about the hourly employees? How many hourly employees do we have to get to the minimum? How many to the midpoint? Is that what you were asking? Getting the hourly employees to the midpoint?
Yeah, which was like 99,000 is what we had figured it. Well, and I don't know about the right report. I didn't have a current report or right report, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that this wage study was done, and we're still talking about it, instead of making decisions.
We're
I
working
do,
very hard to get
I know we're
taxes.
working hard, and I prefaced all my comments in the very beginning about how our Councilman Ritchie and Councilman Hofstadter worked hard to go out there and talk to each and every one of these department heads and get all these numbers. And then Councilman Ritchie talks about all of the numbers, what was it, 83 employees? And there's
Below
just
midpoint.
under 300 employees in the county, 290 or something like that. And there's 83 of them under, was it the mid or
Under the
minimum?
midpoint.
Under the midpoint. The wage study was done a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And we have a third of the county, Boone County employees, a third of them under that midpoint. We keep talking about it and talking about it instead of getting it done. Just making a decision.
I have a proposal. If we are considering trying to get everything funded to the midpoint, we could say everyone above midpoint is 5%. Everyone below midpoint is to the midpoint. If their percentage increase to get them to the midpoint is 10% or more, they don't get the 3%. They just get their increase. If it is 9% or less, then they would get the additional 3% discretionary.
Can you repeat?
I'll try. Above midpoint, 5%. Below midpoint, get everyone to the midpoint. If their increase to get to midpoint is 10% or higher, they do not receive the additional 3%. If it's 9% or lower, the additional 3% discretionary could be offered. So for example, if to get someone to the midpoint was gonna be, it's a 15% raise, they would not receive the additional 3%. That would be discretionary. The 2% is already included in that.
How many employees does that affect? How many employees? Any idea?
Give me a second, yes. How many would not receive the,
Yeah, how many's below the midpoint?
below the midpoint?
It's 83.
83. And then, do you wanna know how many is 10% or higher?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just kind of rough numbers.
21, I think, including us.
And Jennifer, if you would please repeat your thought there with council.
No,
My-
he was out.
Okay, I didn't know if you heard it in the hall. We could say everyone above midpoint 5%, everyone below midpoint, fund them to midpoint. If the increase to get them to the midpoint is 10% or higher, they don't receive the 3% discretionary. If the increase is 9% or less, they would receive the 3% discretionary.
Councilman Hostead, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Okay.
What, do you have the total dollar amount to bring in everybody to those numbers that you just mentioned?
No. I don't think we have that one. No.
No? Do you have the total dollar amount to get everybody to the max?
To the max?
Yeah.
No.
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 Okay, we had talked about $600,000 being the amount of money that we have to work with, and we have to stay within that.
We would just have to do an additional for the, if it goes over 600,000, we would just have to vote to do the additional.
But it won't go over 600,000 because right now we're under 600,000 and we have a 3% merit on those that are 10% or higher.
Yeah, right.
So we should be able to stay within that $600,000.
Absolutely.
So that is a good point to note. And as far as our budget, being over 1.5, those are, again, that's the window and those are one-time expenditures. So correct me if I'm wrong, we've got decent cash reserves, so we have chosen to spend into them for one-time projects. And then looking at keeping the salaries and wages, within the budget that was proposed, so that's not, considered.
I know what you said, but I
Pulling
still
the
have to sit, I just,
Well, technically, it is anytime you spend more than what you're bringing in,
Right,
you're in
but-
cash
but
reserves.
as
It's
far
the
as-
purpose of the cash reserves.
Yes, but as far as, we can identify one-time expenditures that, make up that 1.5,
Yeah.
that are one-time.
You have $1 million plus you have a chunk
Yes.
of road preservation, you have, which again, that's not
Yes.
considered really one time, it's not really.
Just philosophically keeping salaries and wages out of, that category for sustainability.
I just wanna say this, that proposal is, I have to pull highway department out of that, Superior Court out of that, sheriff.
Superior's already, Superior shouldn't be in that 600 because it's already in, it's the advertised.
You included them?
Advertised their mandated amounts.
Oh! Look,
It's not Christmas.
it is. We just went down to 554. Fun money, I'm kidding. We lighten the mood in this room.
And I appreciate everyone's patience. This is a bit to look through, so for those of you who are joining
I would say if, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. If we are considering that, we still need to come back and talk about highway and sheriff.